In October of 2021, I was staying with my cousin near a small town just outside Richmond, Virginia. I'd taken some time off work after a rough breakup, and his guest room gave me a chance to get away from everything for a bit. There wasn't much to do in the area, so I spent a lot of time walking the trails near the river or driving around the old back roads just to clear my head. One afternoon we were talking about local legends, and he brought up this old story about the Lady Beneath the Overpass. Supposedly, if you drove under the Pine Hollow Bridge after midnight and honked twice, a woman in white would appear near the support pillars, staring down at your car. No one really agreed on what happened after that. Some said she just stood there and disappeared. Others claimed she'd follow you home if you didn't drive away fast enough. I thought it was just a variation of the hitchhiker ghost trope, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. A week later, after a long drive and too much caffeine, I decided to check it out for myself. It was a little after 12:30 a.m. when I pulled onto the narrow road that dipped beneath the Pine Hollow overpass. It was colder than usual for October, and the mist rising from the nearby creek gave everything a washed-out look, like the colour had been drained from the world. I parked beneath the bridge, engine idling, and honked twice. Nothing happened at first. I waited in silence, glancing around at the cracked concrete columns and graffiti-scrawled walls. Just as I was about to laugh at myself and head back, I saw something move. High above me, on the far side of the bridge's ledge, there was a figure, pale and still. Not walking, just standing, half shrouded in the fog. I froze. My headlights barely reached that high, so I could only make out the outline of a dress, long hair, and what looked like a slight tilt of the head, like she was listening for something. I blinked and looked again, but she was gone. I didn't hear footsteps or shifting gravel. Just gone. Then my radio turned on by itself. I hadn't touched it. It wasn't even tuned to a station, just static but low, like a whisper beneath white noise. I reached to shut it off, but just as I touched the dial, the car's interior lights flickered and something moved past the passenger window. Not walked, moved, like it was gliding. I turned my head, and there she was, standing no more than 3 feet from the car, outside the passenger side window, her face pale and her eyes too wide, like they didn't blink. Her mouth hung slightly open, not in a scream, but as if mid-breath. Her dress wasn't clean white. It looked soaked at the bottom, almost like it had been dragged through water. I slammed my foot on the gas, tires squealing against the wet road as I sped off, glancing in the rearview mirror only once. She wasn't there anymore. The next morning I told my cousin everything. He didn't laugh. In fact, he looked almost relieved. He admitted that when he first moved into that house, he saw her too, thought he was dreaming until she showed up in their backyard a few weeks later, just once, standing under the trees at the edge of their property, looking toward the house. After that, they put in a floodlight. He hadn't seen her since. I couldn't let it go. I needed to know more. So I drove to the local library, dug through old newspapers and accident records. Eventually I found an article from 1979. A woman named Leanne Dorsey was killed in a hit-and-run while walking home from work. Her body was found near Pine Hollow Bridge. Her killer was never caught. What chilled me most wasn't the story, it was the photo, black and white, grainy, but clearly showing a young woman in a white dress, same face, same wide eyes. That night I decided to drive under the bridge one last time. I didn't honk, I just sat there, lights off, windows up, the air grew cold again still. And then, in the rearview mirror, I saw her. Not standing on the bridge this time, inside the car, back seat, directly behind me. I didn't move, couldn't breathe. I felt her breath against the side of my face, even though the mirror showed her several feet away. She leaned forward, and for a second I thought she was going to speak, but she just smiled and vanished. I drove home that night and packed my things the next morning. I haven't gone back to that town since, but sometimes, when I drive alone at night and glance at my mirror, I swear I catch a glimpse of white fabric in the back seat, just for a second. Then it's gone, but it's enough to remind me. Urban legends don't always stay legends. Sometimes they're just waiting for someone to believe. In August of 2020, I was visiting my sister and her husband in rural Wisconsin, near a place called Cedar Creek. They had recently bought a small property surrounded by thick woods and farmland, and I figured a week of quiet would help me reset after a stressful few months. It was peaceful, sure, but there was an odd tension in the air, Something about the quiet in those woods felt different than other places I'd stayed. Too still, like the trees were listening. I chalked it up to city brain and didn't think much of it. At least not until I asked about the old boarded-up house we passed every time we drove into town. It sat just off the main road, barely visible through overgrown brush, with its windows sealed tight and a no trespassing sign so old it was barely legible. My sister glanced at it once, then told me not to bother asking. Her husband was more direct. He said people called it the boys' house and that even locals wouldn't go near it after dark. Supposedly, it had been abandoned since the late 80s when the last family moved out under strange circumstances. The story was vague, inconsistent. Some said their youngest child vanished, others said he never existed in the first place. But everyone agreed on one detail. People sometimes saw a little boy with bright blue eyes standing in the upstairs window long after the house was supposed to be empty. Curiosity got the better of me. One afternoon I decided to walk down to the house myself. It wasn't a long trek, 10 minutes through the tree line from my sister's backyard. I didn't plan to go inside, just wanted a closer look. The house was even more decayed up close. The wood siding was warped. Vines had overtaken most of the porch, and several windows had shattered from the inside out. But the strange thing was, I felt like I was being watched the moment I stepped onto the property, not by an animal, not by a person, just watched. I walked around the perimeter, staying on the grass. That's when I noticed something scratched into the side of the house near the back door. It looked like a child's handwriting, jagged and uneven. 4 words. He wants to stay. I snapped a picture and turned back toward the woods, and in the reflection of one of the broken windows I saw a small figure standing behind me. I spun around, nothing there, but the reflection was still visible. A boy, maybe 7 or 8, pale skin, bright, unnatural blue eyes, wearing clothes that looked several decades out of place, button-up shirt, high socks, scuffed shoes, and he wasn't looking at me. He was smiling at his own reflection. I backed away slowly, never turning, until the house disappeared behind the trees. I didn't tell my sister what I saw, not right away, but that night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those bright blue eyes staring back. Just before sunrise, I finally drifted off, only to wake up an hour later to the sound of scratching, not on the door, on the window. I live in the city. My first instinct was raccoon, maybe a branch, but when I got up and pulled the curtain back, I froze. On the outside of the glass in the morning condensation were 4 words. He wants to stay. Same handwriting, same size. I didn't leave the room until my sister was awake. When I finally told her, she looked more tired than scared. She admitted she'd seen similar things, shadows in the woods, strange symbols on their back porch. She even mentioned her dog refused to go near the tree line at night. But her husband, he just said, "Don't say anything back to him." I asked what that meant, and he just repeated it. "Don't answer him, that's how he stays." Later that day, I checked the photo I'd taken of the writing on the house. It was gone, not the photo, just the writing. The wall was blank, no scratches, nothing. But I remember seeing it with my own eyes. I knew it had been there. That night I dreamt of the boy. Only this time, I was inside the house. Everything smelled of mildew and wet earth. I was standing at the base of a staircase, and at the top he was waiting. Same pale skin, same unnatural smile. He pointed to a door at the end of the hallway behind him and said, "You can stay too." I woke up drenched in sweat, lungs aching like I hadn't breathed the entire night. The next morning, my sister handed me a newspaper clipping she said she found tucked behind one of the kitchen drawers. It was dated 1987 and showed a picture of the house when it was still occupied. The caption beneath it read, "Community mourns death of 7-year-old Jonathan Miller, who passed in his sleep after months of unexplained illness." His photo was grainy, but unmistakable. Same boy, same eyes. I left the next day. On the drive home, I looked at the rearview mirror more times than I could count. Every now and then, I swore I saw something small ducking out of view in the back seat. It never stayed long, just enough to make sure I noticed. When I finally reached my apartment and shut the door behind me, I felt relief, real relief, until I checked the hallway mirror the next morning. There, written faintly in the condensation left from my shower, were 4 words. He wants to stay. Back in November of 2018, I was working night shifts as a security guard for a corporate office building just outside Boise, Idaho. The building itself wasn't remarkable, 4 stories tall, mostly empty after hours, with motion sensor lights and an outdated alarm system. My shifts were long and quiet, which gave me time to read or catch up on podcasts. But the one thing that made that building different was the view it had of Tower Hill, a wooded slope beyond the back parking lot, stretching up and disappearing into a dense patch of pine. Every local knew Tower Hill, but not because of the hiking trails. It had a story, something kids would dare each other about. The legend of a phone booth that supposedly stood in the woods near the top. A booth that wasn't connected to anything, had no wires, no power source. They said if you found it and picked up the receiver, it would already be ringing. I didn't believe it, of course, but the story stuck with me. They said you weren't supposed to answer it. If you did, you wouldn't be able to forget the voice you heard. It would follow you. Not physically, but in your head. Like it knew your thoughts before you did, and it never stopped calling. I never planned to find it. Not until one night during my shift, the phone in the lobby rang. It was just after 2 a.m., long after everyone had left. I picked up, expecting some system glitch or a misdial, but no one spoke. All I heard was quiet, shallow breathing. I said hello twice, then the line clicked and went dead. The next night, it happened again. Same time, same breathing, no voice. I checked the phone logs. It was listed as an external call, but there was no number, just the word unknown. I thought maybe it was a prank or a tech issue until it happened a third time, and this time, the breathing was louder, closer, like someone was just inches from the speaker. That night, when I left my shift and walked to my car, I noticed something strange in the distance up on Tower Hill, a tiny red light flickering in the trees, not moving, just steady, like the light on an old phone receiver. The logical part of me told me it was a fire tower or maybe someone camping, but something about it felt off. I drove home, but the image stayed in my mind all night. A few days later, the calls stopped, but something else started. I began to hear my name, not loudly, never shouted. Just whispered from behind corners in empty stairwells over the soft hum of the break room fridge. Once, I was walking through the second floor and I heard it come through the intercom system. Just once, my name drawn out like a question. I checked the logs, but no one had accessed the system. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? The next week I got bold, or stupid, and decided to drive up Tower Hill after my shift ended early due to a false fire alarm. I don't know what I expected to find, maybe just closure. But as I climbed the narrow dirt road leading to the upper tree line, my headlights caught something reflective in the woods. A booth, old-fashioned, not rusted but weather-worn. A full glass pane door, a rotary dial inside, and a black receiver hanging slightly off its hook. I pulled over and walked toward it. Every part of me told me to turn around, but I couldn't. I needed to know if it was real, if the story had truth to it. As I stepped closer, the booth lit up. No power lines, no generator. It just turned on. The phone inside started to ring. Not loud, soft, insistent, like it was only meant for me. I stood frozen, watching it ring. Once, twice, 3 times, and then I answered. There was no voice, just silence. But not empty silence, full of something. It felt like the air thickened around me, like I couldn't breathe through it. Then, finally, a sound came through, my voice, saying things I hadn't said yet. It told me I'd leave my job within the year, that I'd move back east, that I'd lose someone I loved. Every word came with this terrible certainty, as if I wasn't being warned. I was being reminded, like it already happened and I was catching up. Then it laughed, not mocking, not angry, just pleased. I dropped the receiver and ran back to my car. My hands wouldn't stop shaking the entire drive back down. Weeks passed. The calls never came again, but what it told me started coming true. I left the job that December. My brother passed unexpectedly that January. I moved back to Massachusetts the following spring. Every word the voice said happened exactly the way it described. I never spoke of it until now, but every once in a while, when I'm walking alone and pass a street payphone or hear an old landline ring, I feel the hairs on my neck rise, because I know it's still out there, and one day it's going to call again. If these urban legend stories made your skin crawl, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Because sometimes the scariest stories are the ones people swear never happened.